pale flash of lightning tore through the ink-black clouds, followed by a deafening roar. Rain poured down in torrents, drenching the muddy earth. In the rippling reflection of a puddle, a figure clad in crimson appeared fragmented and distorted. A young man draped in a grand red opera robe staggered through the mire like a drunkard, his wide sleeves fluttering. Wildly in the storm, the mud clinging to his robe was washed away by the rain, revealing a blood, like red, that contrasted sharply against the darkness of the night. He shouted in frustration, demanding silence from unseen voices as he struggled to remember his identity. Clutching his head, his wet black hair clung to his forehead, and his unfocused eyes searched for clarity amid confusion. His furious cries echoed through the deserted streets, but were quickly swallowed by the endless curtain of rain. Suddenly, his foot caught on a protruding stone, and he fell heavily to the ground. A trickle of crimson blood rolled down his temple. Lying dazed, a faint glimmer of light appeared in his clouded eyes as the name Chun-Ling flashed through his mind. With that utterance, a fragment of memory emerged from the endless whispers that had nearly overwhelmed him, merging with his weakened body. Chun-Ling furrowed his brow, his mind aching as if torn apart. He recalled being a 28-year-old intern director at a theater in the capital, who had stayed behind after a performance to choreograph actors' movements. Then, a violent earthquake had struck. He remembered a sharp pain in his head before everything went black. Most likely, he had been killed by a falling stage light. As Chun-Ling slowly absorbed the memories of the body he now inhabited, he discovered that the original owner was also named Chun-Ling, though their fundamental understanding of the world was completely different. Fragmented memories clashed violently in his mind, threatening to explode. He took deep breaths and struggled to rise from the ground. His opera robe was now a patchwork of black and red, a pitiful sight. His body felt unbearably heavy, as if drained by sleepless nights spent writing scripts. He decided to go home. Exhausted and confused, he relied on the instincts of this body and headed in the direction of home. Though he did not know how he had ended up here, the original owner's memories included this place. After caring for his younger brother at the clinic, he would usually take this path home, a walk of 2 or 3 minutes, but now the journey felt endlessly long. The icy rain soaked through Chun-Ling's body, sending shivers down his spine. After 10 minutes, he arrived at the door of his home. He fumbled in his pockets but found no keys. Then, as if out of habit, he reached under the newspaper box by the door and pulled out a spare key. He unlocked the door and stepped inside. Warm light spilled from the house, illuminating a corner of the dark, rainy night and casting a glow on Chun-Ling's pale face. Sight relaxed his tense nerves, as the warmth seemed to chase away some of the cold and exhaustion. Inside, 2 figures sat at the dining table, their eyes red as if they had just been crying. Hearing the door open, they froze and turned their heads simultaneously. Chun-Ling greeted them, saying he was home. His head still foggy, he moved to change his shoes at the entrance, only to realize he was barefoot, leaving 2 large black footprints on the floor. The 2 figures stared at the red-robed Chun-Ling, their pupils contracting in shock. The man's Adam's apple bobbed as he gaped in terror. Chun-Ling asked his mother if there was any water, saying he was thirsty. Once inside, Chun-Ling's mind relaxed further, teetering on the edge of unconsciousness. He stumbled into the kitchen, grabbed the water dispenser's bottle, and began gulping down the water. Greedily, drops spilled from the corners of his mouth, forming a puddle on the floor that reflected the pale, horrified faces of the 2 in the living room. The woman forced herself to speak, trembling as she asked how he had returned. Chun-Ling seemed oblivious and, growing impatient with drinking, bit down on the bottle's spout, shattering it. Water gushed into his mouth in a torrent of relief. A voice came from behind Chun-Ling, though he was still engrossed in drinking. Voice answered matter-of-factly, explaining that the rain was heavy. He thought he got lost, had fallen a few times and lost his shoes. He apologized for the mess on the floor and said he was too tired to clean it now. The couple in the living room felt a chill run down their spines as they watched this horrifying scene. The flame in the oil lamp flickered, as if an invisible hand toyed with the wick. Their faces were ashen, but they remained frozen, not daring to move. Finally, the water bottle was empty. Chun-Ling wiped his mouth, set the bottle down, and turned around. He staggered toward his bedroom, leaving black footprints on the floor with each step. He mumbled a good night to his parents and closed the door behind him. A dull thud followed as his body collapsed onto the bed. The living room fell into dead silence. After what felt like an eternity, the 2 statuesque figures finally turned their heads stiffly and looked at each other. The flickering flame in the oil lamp steadied, casting a dim light over the room. They sat trembling in their chairs, their faces devoid of color. Man spoke hoarsely, expressing disbelief that Chun-Ling had come back. The woman questioned if he was really their son, and the man wondered who they had killed killed last night, asking if it was a ghost. The relentless rain hammered against the cold window panes, and the couple's hearts trembled like the flickering flame. The woman swallowed hard and asked if they should notify the enforcers. The man, regaining some rationality, refused, fearing their actions would be exposed. The woman whispered a theory that a calamity might have possessed Qinling's corpse. Both turned their gaze toward the tightly shut bedroom door and fell into silence. After a long while, the man made up his mind. He grabbed a black raincoat from the door and pushed it open. The woman asked where he was going. He said he was going to the place where they had buried the body. To verify for himself, he insisted that whatever was in that room now could not possibly be Qinling. The woman declared she would go with him. No one wanted to venture out into the thunderstorm, but the woman chose to brave the rain rather than remain alone with whatever was sleeping in the bedroom. Two figures in raincoats hurried away into the pouring rain. In the bedroom, Qinling, deep in slumber, suddenly twitched his eyelashes as if caught in a nightmare. His consciousness sank deeper and deeper, falling into a bottomless cavern until he landed on something solid and steadied himself. Heavy mechanical sounds echoed, thud, 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 and beams of light pierced the darkness, converging on a figure clad in crimson. Qinling instinctively raised a hand to shield his eyes and asked where he was. As his vision adjusted, he saw only the scarlet opera robe he wore, the worn wooden floor beneath his feet, and a corner of a black curtain. Illuminated behind him beyond the light was endless darkness. He squinted upward and recognized the light came from spotlights fixed to a steel frame. As a theater director in his previous life, Qinling identified the setting as a stage but noted the lighting was inferior, the curtains black, and the floor old and creaky. Doubting reality, he took a step forward. The floorboards screeched loudly. As he moved toward the edge of the light, another beam followed, tracking him. Qinling shouted, questioning who was there, realizing the lights were controlled by someone since the stage was too dilapidated for automation. His voice echoed eerily in the darkness. An electronic screen at the stage's edge lit up, displaying red characters, audience expectation 29%. A note in the corner warned that if the audience's expectation fell below 20%, the theater could not guarantee the actor's safety. Qinling stared, bewildered, asking what audience. The sound of lights turning on echoed again, and darkness before the stage receded, revealing rows of wooden chairs in tiered formation stretching far into the distance. These were audience seats, now filled with shadowy, humanoid figures whose forms were obscured except for countless pairs of crimson pupils staring at Qinling like a pack of cats cornering a mouse. Cold sweat dripped down Qinling's neck as he forced himself to look away and bolted toward the stage's other end. The follow spot tracked him, but he found a bare, solid wall blocking the exit. He ran to the opposite side and found the same. This stage had no exits. The crimson pupils in the audience shifted in unison, engrossed in the performance starring Qinling. Screen flickered, and the audience expectation rose from 29% to 30%. Qinling pinched himself, trying to wake but felt only pain. The screen displayed another message, intermission over. Please continue the performance. A bell rang crisply above the stage. Before he could react, the scene shattered and his consciousness blurred. Just before losing awareness, he saw the massive black curtain behind him slowly drawing open. Qinling jolted upright in bed, sheets soaked with cold sweat, chest heaving, eyes filled with terror. He scanned the room and relaxed upon confirming he was in his bedroom, not on the stage. He muttered that it must have been a dream, then got out of bed and walked to the living room. The rain had mostly stopped, but the sky remained gloomy. He called for his parents without response. The house was eerily quiet. His stomach growled hollowly. Drained by the nightmare and feeling lightheaded, he headed to the kitchen to find food. Upon entering, he tripped over something and looked down to see the mangled remains of a water bucket, as if gnawed by a wild beast. Suspicious, Qinling picked up the bucket, tossed it aside, grabbed a rag, and knelt to wipe the spilled water. Suddenly, he froze as the puddle moved on its own, as if an invisible figure crouched opposite him, using a finger to write in the water. The transparent water turned blood red, forming a twisted message. "We are watching you." Qinling's pupils contracted sharply. When he blinked, the blood red characters vanished as if never there. An illusion seared into his mind. He whipped his head around, sensing countless invisible crimson eyes watching him in the empty living room. Feeling eerily similar to his nightmare, he stood stiff as a statue for what felt like an eternity before forcing himself to take deep breaths. Qinling considered that he might have been too stressed lately, staying up late to prepare for the enforcer exams. He reminded himself that the original owner of the body was not him and wondered if something had gone wrong during the fusion of their souls, possibly damaging his mind. He recalled hearing that severe schizophrenia could cause indistinguishable hallucinations. Suppressing his fear, Qinling tried to rationalize everything scientifically. A wave of intense hunger washed over him, prompting him to grab a sausage from the cutting board and devour it in a few bites, which helped him feel somewhat grounded. He thought he might need a psychiatrist. Still shaken, Chun-Ling didn't bother washing his face, threw on a black cotton coat, and hurried out the door. The cold air made him shiver. This was his first real encounter with the world since regaining consciousness. He took a deep breath, steeling himself to face the unknown and whatever challenges lay ahead. When he glanced up at the sky, he involuntarily exclaimed in disbelief. The morning light spilled from the east, and above the small town floated dreamlike blue ribbons, auroras in broad daylight. Chun-Ling stood at his doorstep, staring at the sky full of auroras for a long time, muttering to himself about the strange world he found himself in. Elsewhere, two figures trudged along a mountain path, one wiping sweat from his forehead and complaining about the cold and the icy road, while the other urged caution. They spoke of having been walking for a long time and nearing a mass grave. As they crested the ridge, they saw scattered mounds of earth, some fresh, others old, most without tombstones, only wooden markers or personal belongings placed haphazardly in front. The heavy rain from the previous night had washed away many mounds, scattering wooden sticks and items everywhere, leaving the area in disarray. Unexpectedly, the mass grave was cordoned off with yellow caution tape, and dozens of figures in black and red uniforms moved within the restricted area, their expressions grim. Man recognized them as enforcers and wondered why they were there. The woman paled and questioned if the enforcers had discovered something, if Ling was alive and had gone to them. They had thought they killed Chun-Ling, but his return and the enforcer's presence suggested otherwise. The man observed that even for criminal cases, the enforcers in District 3 would send at most 3 people. Dispatching over a dozen could only mean a calamity had appeared. The woman realized this too and broke into a cold sweat. Man grabbed her wrist and urged them to leave. Suddenly, a cold voice ordered them to stop. They froze as an enforcer ducked under the caution tape and approached, narrowing his eyes. He demanded to know who they were and what they were doing there. The woman stammered, but the man claimed they were visiting their son, buried there on his death anniversary. The enforcer asked why they had been running. The man admitted they were scared, fearing a calamity had emerged from the Grey Realm and that they might get caught in the crossfire. Enforcer expressed surprise at their knowledge and told them the truth about a calamity was classified. He informed them they could not visit their son today and ordered them to go home, warning them not to share what they had seen. The man and woman agreed and prepared to leave, but the enforcer stopped them, demanding their names and addresses as required by confidentiality regulations. They complied, giving names and an address on Frost Street in District 3. After recording the information, the enforcer returned to a man in a black coat, handing over the document. Man, Han Meng, took a deep drag from his cigarette and instructed sending a few people to secretly follow the couple, as they seemed suspicious. He reasoned that Frost Street was at least 10 kilometers away, and for them to arrive at this hour, they must have left around 4 in the morning during the storm, which seemed unlikely. He also noted that a mass grave was a place for those who died alone or far from home, questioning why parents would bury their child there. The enforcer named Xiao Qin was stunned and admitted he had not considered that. Han Meng teased him about passing the enforcer exam. Xiao Qin awkwardly changed the subject, asking if a calamity had really emerged from the Grey Realm last night. Han Meng did not answer but pulled out a palm-sized device with a compass, like needle marked with colors representing various regions. Jiang Qin asked about the device, but Han Meng warned it was precious and reserved for judges. He explained it detected the danger level of calamities if only a Grey Realm convergence occurred without calamities. Crossing over, the needle would not react. The higher the calamities level, the more violently the needle would shake. Jiang Qin expressed concern about the possibility of a calamity having emerged. Han Meng said it was unlikely, as Districts 2 and 3 would already be in chaos if that were true, but they needed to complete the scan to be sure. As Han Meng activated the calamity compass, the other enforcers gathered around, watching closely. After a few seconds of stillness, the needle suddenly jerked violently, sweeping wildly across the colored regions. Accompanied by a sharp screeching sound, Han Meng's pupils contracted as he instinctively released the device, which exploded into countless pieces. A shard grazed his cheek, drawing blood. Meanwhile, Chun-Ling sneezed violently in the cold wind. As someone from the north in his previous life, he found the weather here almost unbearable, cold, damp, and despite the sun hanging high, offering no warmth, a lazy voice called out ahead, ordering people to make way. Chun-Ling snapped out of his thoughts and instinctively stepped to the side of the road. At the end of the street, a tricycle slowly approached Chun-Ling. A young man pedaled while another sat on the back seat, surrounded by 2 large buckets of salt. Man on the back scooped salt with a ladle and scattered it across the frost-covered road, causing the icy frost to begin melting. The salt spreader noticed Chun-Ling Ling standing by the roadside and raised an eyebrow, addressing him by name. He expressed surprise at seeing the top student there and asked if Chun Ling had failed the enforcer exam. The man was Zhao Yi, who had grown up on the same street as Chun Ling but harbored envy toward him. Zhao Yi's mother had often used Chun Ling's excellent grades as a benchmark, fueling Zhao Yi's resentment. Chun Ling replied casually that he had passed the written exam but still had the physical test ahead. Zhao Yi scoffed and flung a large ladle of salt toward the roadside, deliberately splashing Chun Ling. Salt grains covered Chun Ling's hair and cotton robe. He quickly brushed off the salt and glared at Zhao Yi. Zhao Yi rode away leisurely on the tricycle, sticking out his tongue and making a face at Chun Ling while propping one foot on a salt bucket. Chun Ling, now a 28-year-old adult familiar with society's trials, felt both annoyed and amused by the petty prank but chose not to chase Zhao Yi, focusing instead on more important matters. As Chun Ling prepared to continue on his way, his gaze caught something on the ground, and he froze. The frost that had come into contact with the salt was melting, leaving a faint white residue where a line of text formed. Audience expectation 27%. Before he could react, the salt dissolved completely, and the scene vanished as if it had been a fleeting illusion. Chun Ling rubbed his eyes and muttered in disbelief before quickening his pace toward the clinic a few minutes later. Chun Ling pushed open the clinic's door. The clinic was actually a two-story residential house on Frost Street with a plain gray exterior reminiscent of his rural hometown. Despite its rough appearance, it was one of the better buildings on the street, offering some protection from the wind. A man in a white coat sitting behind a wooden desk turned slightly upon seeing Chun Ling and remarked on his return to pick up medicine for his brother, noting that his brother had transferred to a hospital in district. Chun Ling explained that this time the medicine was for himself. He sat down at the table, visibly tense. The doctor, Dr. Lin, asked what was bothering Chun Ling. Chun Ling said his mind wasn't feeling right and that he had been experiencing hallucinations. Dr. Lin, specializing in psychiatry, asked for details about the symptoms. Chun Ling described a dream from the previous night in which he stood on a stage before an audience whose faces he couldn't see clearly but who didn't seem human. He was running desperately on the stage, unable to find an exit. Chun Ling said that after waking, he felt as if they were still watching him. Dr. Lin expressed intrigue and asked if Chun Ling felt like he was being watched. Chun Ling said it didn't feel like a delusion but like the audience was inside his head, observing his every move and treating him like a former force to entertain them. Dr. Lin asked if the audience did anything beyond watching. Chun Ling hesitated, then said they seemed able to influence things around him. Dr. Lin found this fantastical but was interrupted when he suddenly spat out a mouthful of bright red blood onto the floor. Chun Ling was startled and asked if Dr. Lin was sick. Dr. Lin wiped his lips and said the blood wasn't his. He frowned and looked down at the teacup on the table, which had been filled with thick, coagulated blood. He recalled brewing pu'er tea just a minute ago and noted that only he and Chun Ling had been in the clinic, making tampering impossible. The cup of blood had appeared inexplicably. Chun Ling's face grew paler as he realized something. He spoke hoarsely that they might really exist. Dr. Lin stared at the cup of blood before slowly turning to Chun Ling and asking how long the symptoms had been happening. Chun Ling said 1 day since regaining consciousness. Dr. Lin asked what Chun Ling had been doing before regaining consciousness. Chun Ling replied he couldn't remember. Dr. Lin inquired if Chun Ling had ever been possessed by a calamity or encountered a gray realm convergence the previous night. Chun Ling recognized the term vaguely from the original owner of the body. Dr. Lin poured the blood from the teacup down the drain and explained that, before the Great Cataclysm, a hypothesis existed that countless parallel timelines formed from the earliest universe, spreading infinitely like rays of light from a candle flame without intersecting. After a crimson meteor streaked across the sky, chaos ensued as timelines were disrupted and an unknown gray world began overlapping with reality. Dr. Lin placed a piece of paper above rippling water left in the cup. The waves soaked the paper, starting with small wet spots that gradually spread. He explained that initially only small parts of the worlds overlapped, but over time the overlapping grew larger, allowing substances and creatures from the gray world to appear in theirs. Most human, inhabited areas had been taken over by that world, leaving only 9 domains to shelter humanity and preserve its existence. Dr. Lin explained that because the sky of that world was gray, it was called the Gray Realm. When the Gray Realm converged with their reality, bizarre events beyond comprehension occurred, and creatures from the Gray Realm, known as calamities, could descend into their world. He added that about 80% of survivors who encountered a Gray Realm convergence or were attacked by calamities developed mental disorders, with most never fully recovering. Dr. Lin suspected that Chun Ling's current condition was related to the Gray Realm and asked if he had had ever encountered a gray realm convergence or been caught in one. Chun-Ling searched the original owner's memories but found nothing from last night and admitted bitterly that he did not know. Dr. Lin then took out a sheet of letter paper from a drawer and wrote quickly, explaining that Chun-Ling's condition was no longer just a mental illness and that he, as an ordinary person, could not cure him. However, he knew someone who might help with the aftereffects of gray realm contamination, a true doctor. Chun-Ling's eyes lit up with hope as he asked where to find this person. Dr. Lin said the doctor lived in Aurora City but often traveled offering free medical treatment to difficult cases as part of their path to becoming gods. He instructed Chun-Ling to give the letter to the enforcers at the gates of Aurora City, leave his name and address, and wait for the doctor to come within 3 days at most. Chun-Ling thanked him sincerely and took the envelope. Earlier, when Chun-Ling saw the salt melting on the road, he had sensed something was wrong. His condition could not be explained by mere illness. Coming to the small clinic was partly because he was already nearby and partly because he had no other place to turn for help. Dr. Lin's mention of the doctor and the path to becoming gods made Chun-Ling suspect that this world had a unique system for human cultivation, or else humanity would have been wiped out during the Great Cataclysm. And Gray Realm Convergence, he even suspected that the distorted state of science in this world might be related to the Great Cataclysm. Dr. Lin smiled and told Chun-Ling not to thank him. Asking him to send regards to his brother, Chun-Ling replied that his brother was still hospitalized in District 2 and that he would pass on the greetings during his. Lin narrowed his eyes and murmured, "A performer, huh?" Later, wrapped in a thick cotton robe, Chun-Ling walked home under the cold wind, reflecting on the screen he had seen in his dream. The audience expectation value had fluctuated with various events: 29% when he first saw the screen, 30% when he tried to escape, 27% on his way here, and 29% again when Dr. Lin was pranked. He wondered what influenced the rise and fall of the expectation value if the audience was truly in his mind and these numbers were not hallucinations. Chun-Ling theorized that the stage, audience, and expectation value were connected, with each increase coinciding with an event or plot point. The more interesting the events around him, the higher the expectation value would rise. The screen had warned that if the expectation fell below 20%, the actor's safety would not be guaranteed, implying potential danger since the audience could interfere with reality to some extent. Chun-Ling feared he might become a tool for their amusement, toyed with until death. Determined to prove his theory, Chun-Ling decided to actively design plot points. At that moment, a middle-aged man with a towel wrapped around his head called out to him warmly from a breakfast stall by the street. Asking if he had eaten yet, Chun-Ling smiled slightly and approached the stall. The man, Uncle Zhao, offered Chun-Ling steaming soy milk and fried dough sticks, insisting on treating him to breakfast. Chun-Ling tried to pay with 3 copper coins, but Uncle Zhao refused, saying he only asked that Chun-Ling help his son, Zhao Yi, with his studies whenever possible. Chun-Ling learned that Zhao Yi had not graduated and was struggling with his grades, prompting Uncle Zhao to plan having him repeat the year to avoid a life of odd jobs. Uncle Zhao lamented that Zhao Yi did not work hard despite his potential. Chun-Ling hesitated before asking if Uncle Zhao knew why Zhao Yi's grades were so poor. When Uncle Zhao asked why, Chun-Ling fell silent for a long moment and then shook his head, saying he had promised Zhao Yi to keep it a secret. Uncle Zhao pleaded for the truth, explaining that as Zhao Yi's father, he had worked tirelessly to provide for his son's education and deserved to know anything that could help him. Moved by Uncle Zhao's plea, Chun-Ling finally confessed that Zhao Yi was in a relationship with a guy. Uncle Zhao was stunned, unable to believe it at first. Chun-Ling calmly ate his fried dough stick as the words sank in. Uncle Zhao's expression stiffened, shifting from confusion to disbelief before settling into a deathly silence. Chun-Ling reminded Uncle Zhao that he had promised to keep the secret, but noted that Zhao Yi was always hanging out with that other guy and that it was affecting his studies. Uncle Zhao's heart raced as he processed the revelation. Torn between shock and concern, Chun-Ling sighed and told Uncle Zhao that just today, he had seen Zhao Yi sitting on the back of that other boy's bike, laughing. Without a care, Uncle Zhao began to tremble slightly. His hands clenched into fists and his breathing growing heavier. He forced a smile, unsettling rather than reassuring, and said he understood, thanking Chun-Ling. Chun-Ling reminded him that he had promised Zhao Yi not to reveal his source, and Uncle Zhao assured him he would keep the secret. After finishing his soy milk, Chun-Ling left the stall, but Uncle Zhao seemed lost in thought. He rummaged through the shop, pulled out a thick wooden stick from a corner, and sat slowly on a stool at the shop's entrance. A cold breeze swept through the street, ruffling the sweat-soaked towel on Uncle Zhao's forehead as he gripped the stick, his bloodshot eyes fixed on the end of the street with a murderous intensity. Chun-Ling pretended to leave but circled back through an alley, standing under a tree's shade with a clear view of the shop. A few minutes later, a tricycle wobbled into view from the streets, and Zhao Yi lounged on its side with crossed legs, 2 empty buckets of salt behind him, playing with a few copper paper coins and grinning broadly. Zhao Yi remarked that making money wasn't hard, but the boy pedaling the tricycle protested, saying he had done all the work. Next day the boy glared but backed down when Zhao Yi shot him a fierce look, gritting his teeth as he pedaled home. Zhao Yi, known as the neighborhood bully of Frost Street, was feared by the younger kids who endured his bullying. In silence he strode confidently toward his family's shop, clutching the 18 coins, but felt an overwhelming sense of foreboding upon arrival. Uncle Zhao stood slowly, gripping the wooden stick, his furious eyes locking onto Zhao Yi as he approached like a general ready for battle. Uncle Zhao pointed a trembling finger at the boy pedaling away in the distance and accused Zhao Yi of sneaking around instead of studying properly. He ranted about Zhao Yi's relationship with the other boy, questioning how a man could carry on the Zhao family line and accusing him of trying to end their family legacy. Uncle Zhao chased Zhao Yi with the stick as Zhao Yi howled in pain. The neighbors gathered, whispering and pointing at Zhao Yi being chased, their faces filled with shock. Chun Ling's mind noted the rising audience expectation value as the scene unfolded. He called out to the boy on the tricycle, Xiao Lu, who turned around confused. Chun Ling asked how much Zhao Yi had paid him for the day's work. Xiao Lu replied with resentment that Zhao Yi had given him only 2 coins despite promising more, and had threatened him to continue as his errand boy. Chun Ling asked Xiao Lu if he wanted to get back at Zhao Yi or ensure Zhao Yi never dared to bully him again. Xiao Lu affirmed his desire, and Chun Ling offered to teach him. Meanwhile, Zhao Yi, exhausted from being chased, pleaded with Uncle Zhao to stop hitting him and insisted he was not interested in men, claiming he only liked mature women. Crowd's expressions shifted to thoughtful surprise. Uncle Zhao slowed and questioned Zhao Yi about his relationship with the boy on the bike. Zhao Yi insisted they were just friends and claimed he was telling the truth. Suddenly, a young voice interrupted as Xiao Lu rushed to Zhao Yi's side, shielding him from Uncle Zhao's stick and shouting for him to hit him. Instead, both Zhao Yi and Uncle Zhao were stunned by the boy's protective act, and the atmosphere froze that afternoon. The screams on Frost Street seemed endless. Chun Ling sat quietly under a tree, resting his head on his hand, watching the spectacle and monitoring the fluctuating audience expectation value. Initially, each time Uncle Zhao struck Zhao Yi, the expectation value rose slightly but eventually stalled at 48 before dropping to 47 as the audience grew bored. Chun Ling wondered if the audience in his mind was merely there for the drama through this experiment. He confirmed that the audience's expectation value rose with exciting events but declined during dull moments, suggesting he needed to create continuous, exciting plotlines to keep the value above 20. Chun Ling reflected that Zhao Yi had provoked him first and, as the neighborhood bully, deserved a lesson, but he could not stage such scenes every day without becoming a villain wreaking havoc. The thought exhausted him. Chun Ling's only hope now was the doctor from Aurora City that Dr. Lin had mentioned, who might cleanse him of the calamity contamination and save him from a forced life as an entertainer. As he pondered this, a low, resonant bell tolled from a distance, 3 chimes that seemed to pierce through space itself and reverberate in every corner of the world. The sound of the 3 disaster bells, everyone's expressions shifted abruptly. Even Uncle Zhao, who had been chasing Zhao Yi, halted and stared toward the horizon in shock. An elderly man's face turned pale as he explained that the disaster bell was a warning from the enforcers indicating a gray realm convergence in the district and the invasion of a calamity. He recalled that the Aurora domain was supposedly protected by the Aurora, making such convergences nearly impossible, with fewer than 3 calamities appearing in the past decade. People questioned the calamity's location, but no one knew. The elderly man ordered everyone to return home immediately and avoid going outside unless necessary. The crowd's faces drained of color. Zhao Yi, who had been howling in pain moments before, collapsed to his knees. The ground trembled slightly as Chun Ling spotted over a dozen riders galloping toward them, each clad in black and red uniforms with gun holsters, their expressions grave. A commanding enforcer announced that a suspected high-risk calamity had appeared, placing District 3 under full lockdown with no entry or exit permitted. He urged vigilance for suspicious signs such as sudden roads or buildings, strange creatures, or abnormal human behavior, and instructed citizens to report anything unusual immediately. The enforcers' voices echoed through Frost Street and every corner of District 3, accompanied by the lingering toll of the disaster bell, filling the air with palpable tension. No one lingered to watch any drama. Everyone hurried home. Zhao Yi, after a harsh slap from his father, was dragged inside while cursing. Chun Ling stood alone under a tree, preparing to leave when 2 lines of text appeared among fallen leaves. Audience expectation plus 18 and current expectation 65%. Surprised by the sudden spike, he feared the enforcers were coming for him at District 3's enforcer headquarters. Dim sunlight filtered through the hemispherical glass dome, casting kaleidoscopic light across the room. A massive flag hung in the center, black with 2 overlapping blue hexagram stars resembling Arctic night sky stars. More than a dozen enforcers in black and red uniforms stood in formation, their faces serious as they awaited the arrival of 5 judges in black trench coats. Han Meng, distinguished by 4 silver stripes on his coat hem, led the judges as they entered. All enforcers snapped to attention. Han Meng inquired about the situation, and an enforcer reported the disaster bells ringing and the full lockdown of District 3, though the calamity remained undetected. The enforcer hesitated before asking about the calamity compass's self-destruction. Han Meng explained there were 2 possibilities. Either a special calamity whose abilities rendered the compass ineffective had appeared, a theoretical scenario never before observed, or a level 9 apocalypse level calamity had invaded, its residual energy destroying the compass. The mention of an apocalypse calamity caused pallor among the enforcers, but one judge laughed off the fear, noting such a calamity could annihilate not just District 3 but all of Aurora City, making its actual presence unlikely. The judges agreed the most probable cause was a special calamity. Han Meng admitted that without the compass, assessing the threat was impossible unless the calamity revealed itself again. He ordered mobilization of all personnel for a thorough search, emphasizing the urgency of finding it before harm occurred. When concerns about manpower arose, Han Meng instructed recruiting reserve enforcers from recent exam candidates under the guise of a physical test. Meanwhile, on Frost Street, 2 disheveled figures stood hesitantly at their doorstep. The house, once theirs, was now occupied by something returned from the dead, a calamity disguised as Chun Ling. Li Xiuquan swallowed hard, and Chen Tan resolved they must enter, grab valuables, and flee to District 5 or 6, far from the danger. Despite fears of awakening the entity inside, Chun Tan pointed to muddy footprints indicating it had already left. The woman unlocked the door, and they rushed inside, hastily gathering money, valuables, and anything portable, leaving bulky items behind. Chun Tan took the bedroom, Li Xiuquan the living room. The man stuffed money into his pocket and hesitated before grabbing an axe kept for self-defense, adding it to their sacks. Their family was poor, but they could not abandon what little they had earned. Li Xiuquan packed 3 pieces of cotton clothing, ensured nothing was left behind, and hurried to the living room. As they hoisted their sacks to leave, Li Xiuquan asked about Yan's return. Chen Tan decided they would first go to District 2 to pick him up and flee together, acknowledging Yan would search for his brother. Though Chun Tan reminded her that brother was already dead as Chun Tan reached for the door, the faint sound of a key turning in the lock froze them both. The door slowly opened, and a young man entered. Chun Ling, seeing them with sacks, looked puzzled and asked where they were going. Chen Tan and Li Xiuquan appeared pale as a fast horse galloped past the window, followed by an enforcer's voice echoing through the street. Outside the narrow house, an enforcer's voice announced that a suspected high-risk calamity had appeared, declaring District 3 under full lockdown and forbidding anyone from entering or leaving. The enforcer warned citizens to be vigilant for suspicious signs such as roads or buildings appearing out of nowhere, strange creatures, or humans behaving abnormally, and to report anything unusual immediately. The voice gradually faded away, leaving an eerie silence inside the house. Hearing the announcement, Chen Tan and Li Xiuquan trembled, their legs shaking as they stared at Chun Ling, their minds conjuring images of a fanged demon from hell. Chun Ling noticed their unease and, seeing the 2 large sacks, tried to reassure them that the calamity did not seem nearby and that the street looked fine. Chun Tan and Li Xiuquan remained silent. Chun Ling sighed helplessly, recalling that he had initially dismissed the news about an apocalypse-level calamity invasion. However, when he saw the audience expectation value skyrocket after the enforcer's announcement, he realized something was wrong. Zhao Yi had been beaten all afternoon with only a slight rise in expectation, but the announcement caused it to surge dramatically. Chun Ling understood that the audience had found something thrilling, likely him considering Dr. Lin's mention of the Grey Realm convergence and calamities, and Chun Ling's recent transmigration with no memory of the original owner's final moments. He suspected he was the calamity the enforcers sought. He had contemplated turning himself in to deal with the audience in his mind, but feared the enforcers would kill him along with it. He decided to lay low and observe, seeing Chun Tan and Li Xiuquan still tense. Chun Ling sighed and took the sack from Li Xiuquan. He questioned where she could go during the lockdown, noting that Districts 2 and 3 were sealed off, and asking if she planned to sleep on the streets. Xiuquan, terrified at first, calmed slightly and forced a smile. Agreeing with him, Chun Tan urged Chun Ling to put the sack down and reminded him not to be nervous, asking what would happen to Yan if they ran away. Chun Tan studied Chun Ling closely, searching for any hint of abnormality or malice, but found none. Chun Ling's every move was identical to the Chun Ling he knew, showing no trace of a calamity. Yet Chun Tan knew deep down this was not the real Chun Ling. He was already dead. Chun Ling pulled out chairs and invited them to sit, then went to the kitchen to get water. Li Xiuquan and Chun Tan exchanged exchanged a glance before sitting down while pouring water. Chun-Ling tried to lighten the mood by casually mentioning the sausage Li Xiuquan had left for him that morning, asking how she made it. Li Xiuquan looked confused, unable to recall leaving any sausage since she and Chan Tan had gone to the mass grave the night before. Chun-Ling clarified he meant the sausage on the cutting board. Li Xiuquan's confusion deepened, and then her face turned pale as she remembered something. Chan Tan whispered, asking if she had left any sausage, and Li Xiuquan trembled, saying she had not but noticed the boning knife on the cutting board was gone when she packed earlier. Chan Tan's expression changed dramatically. Chun-Ling, standing with his back to them in the kitchen, calmly remarked that the sausage was tasty but a bit tough and advised cooking it softer next time. The living room fell into silence. Chun-Ling brought water and handed it to them, noticing their faces growing paler. He asked if they were unwell. Puzzled by their reaction, Chan Tan replied that they were fine but took a deep breath and subtly pulled the sack closer with his foot. He asked Chun-Ling if he remembered what had happened yesterday. Chun-Ling shook his head, unable to recall. Chan Tan then asked if Chun-Ling thought they had treated him well. Chun-Ling answered without hesitation that they had, acknowledging that if they had not taken him in, he might have frozen to death on the streets. He said his birth parents had abandoned him, but they had raised him as their own, working hard to put him through school, and everything he had was thanks to them. Relief flashed in Chun Tan's eyes. He then asked if Chun-Ling would be willing to save A. Yen if one day the boy became sick and only Chun-Ling's heart could save him. Chun-Ling was stunned. The words feeling familiar. Fragmented memories from the original owner's mind surged forward, causing his head to ache as he recalled hearing similar words the previous night. Chan Tan explained that A. Yen was their flesh and blood, and that Li Xiuquan had ruined her health taking medicine to conceive him after 10 years of trying. Now that A. Yen was sick, they could not watch him die. A shaman in District 2 had said that a young heart from someone under 20 could replace A. Yen's failing one. He reminded Chun-Ling that A. Yen had called him brother for years, and that they had never asked for anything before, but now begged him to save A. Yen. Chan Tan's body trembled as he pleaded, his eyes filled with hope and longing for forgiveness. At that moment, the fragmented memories fully resurfaced in Chun-Ling's mind. Clutching his throbbing head, he spoke hoarsely, accusing Chan Tan of killing him. Chan Tan asked if A. Yen knew. Chun-Ling replied that he did not, and that if A. Yen knew the heart he was about to receive was Chun-Ling's, he would rather die than accept it. Chan Tan snapped out of his inner struggle and guilt, reached into the sack at his feet, and pulled out a sharp axe. He told Chun-Ling that he was already dead and should not be here, vowing to set him free from whatever had taken over his body. Low rumble of thunder echoed across the dark sky as Chan Tan raised the axe high and swung it down with force. The axe struck with a thud, warm liquid splattering across Chan Tan's face. Crimson blood bloomed on the floor as Chun-Ling's body collapsed with a dull thud, the axe embedded in his neck, nearly severing his head. His lifeless eyes stared into the void, his face etched with pain and confusion. He was dead. No heartbeat, no breath, his body growing cold like a martyr lying in a bed of red blossoms. Chan Tan's chest heaved violently as he stared at the lifeless body, his clothes soaked with sweat. Li Xiuquan slumped in her chair, trembling, and asked if Chun-Ling was dead. Chan Tan confirmed he was. When Li Xiuquan asked about the calamity, Chan Tan hesitated and admitted he did not know. Li Xiuquan stared blankly at the corpse before suggesting that perhaps Chun-Ling was not a calamity, but rather a divine chance for atonement. Chan Tan responded bitterly that if that were true, they deserved to go to hell. Li Xiuquan then proposed that the calamity might have been too weak, dying from a single axe blow. Chan Tan remained silent, staring at the blood-soaked figure before retrieving a kitchen knife from the kitchen. When Li Xiuquan asked what he was doing, Chan Tan explained he intended to cut open Chun-Ling's chest to see if his heart was still there, wanting to know if he had killed a monster or destroyed a chance for redemption. Kneeling beside the corpse, Chan Tan began cutting open the chest while Li Xiuquan, pale-faced, turned away and vomited in the kitchen. After a few minutes, Chan Tan stood and reported that the chest cavity was empty. Chun-Ling had no heart. When Li Xiuquan questioned how that was possible, Chan Tan admitted he did not know but confirmed whatever Chun-Ling was, it was dead now. Chan Tan decided to hide the body in the cellar since enforcers were outside and they could not move it out. Chan Tan moved the living room table, opened the heavy wooden plank on the floor, revealing the dark, narrow cellar, and prepared to place Chun-Ling's body inside. Noticing the gruesome neck wound, he hesitated and instructed Li Xiuquan to fetch A. Yan's opera costume, reasoning that regardless of what Chun-Ling had become, it still A. Ling's body and deserved decent clothing. Li Xiuquan shuddered, recalling that Chun-Ling had worn that costume the previous night, but Chan Tan dismissed it as just clothing and decided to leave it as is. Chan Tan tossed the body into the cellar, covered it with the wooden plank, and replaced the table. Li Xiuquan began cleaning the bloodstains despite feeling nauseous, holding her nose as she worked. Suddenly, rapid knocking sounded at the door. Li Xiuquan's heart skipped a beat, and she looked at Chan Tan Tan in panic. Chun Tan instructed her not to answer and to pretend no one was home. They held their breath as the knocking grew louder and more urgent, followed by a deep voice outside demanding the door be opened immediately. Identifying themselves as enforcers, both faces turned pale at the word enforcers. After a moment's hesitation, Chun Tan gave Li Xiuquan a look, quickly changed his shirt, and approached the door, buttoning it hastily. The door creaked open a crack, and Chun Tan slipped outside. Closing the door behind him, he asked the officers what the matter was. Under a light drizzle, two figures in black and red uniforms stood outside with grim expressions. They questioned why the door had not been opened sooner. Chun Tan explained he had been asleep and needed time to dress. Offering an awkward smile, the enforcers glanced at his hastily buttoned shirt and relaxed slightly. They confirmed the house belonged to Chen Ling and inquired about his whereabouts. Chun Tan said Chen Ling had gone out that morning and not returned. One enforcer handed Chun Tan a notice, instructing that Chen Ling was required to assemble at the District 3 Enforcer headquarters at 7 a.m. the next day, warning that failure to appear would forfeit the position. Chen Tan's heart skipped a beat, but he maintained a straight face, nodded, and promised to deliver the notice. Enforcers left, and Chun Tan breathed a sigh of relief before stepping back inside immediately. A sharp metallic scraping sound reached Chun Tan's ears, chilling him. Li Xiuquan huddled in the corner, trembling uncontrollably upon seeing Chun Tan return. She slowly pointed toward the kitchen. There, a figure in crimson stood with its back to them, head bowed as if chewing on something. Chun Tan's mind went blank upon seeing the figure, a boy with a nearly severed neck, the wound healing rapidly. In his left hand, he held a kitchen knife. In his right, a blood-stained axe. He shoved both into his mouth. The figure slowly turned around, revealing Chen Ling, heartless, neck wounded, cheeks bulging as he chewed on metal and wood remnants. His unfocused eyes glowing eerily like a beast's. A voice from behind addressed him as Dad, and the figure murmured, "I'm hungry." Chen Ling experienced a dream on a cloudy afternoon after finishing martial arts training in the suburbs and returning home drenched in sweat. He noticed a cream cake on the dining table, an expensive treat their family could rarely afford. He felt joy upon hearing this, as Yan's congenital heart disease had been a family nightmare with no cure found despite their efforts. Recently, his parents had found a hospital in District 2 and sent Yan there. Confident of a cure, Chen Ling happily ate the cake, but his consciousness soon faded. He slumped onto the table, seeing his mother, Li Xiuquan, cover her mouth and sob, while his father whispered apologies and asked if he would be willing to give his heart for Yan's illness. Chen Ling opened his mouth to respond but lost consciousness. He felt himself being stuffed into a bag as rain pattered against it. After what seemed like an eternity, he was placed on a table, felt his chest cut open, and something removed. He was dressed in clothes and moved in pouring rain as thick soil gradually buried him. Darkness and silence engulfed him. In the darkness, Chen Ling's eyes suddenly opened. Spotlights illuminated a crimson figure lying center stage. After disorientation, Chen Ling propped himself up and shakily stood. He cursed his return and instinctively looked at the screen at center stage, his pupils contracting sharply. Screen displayed audience expectation +1, audience expectation +1, current expectation 67%, followed by detected loss of actor connection, performance interrupted. Then audience expectation 50, current expectation 17%, and warning, audience intervention detected. Chun Tan swallowed hard. Chun Tan croaked in disbelief, questioning how Chen Ling could still be moving with no heart and his head nearly severed. Li Xiuquan, consumed by fear, incoherently explained that the opera robe Chen Ling wore had appeared when he crawled out of the ground. It was the same robe they had draped over him during burial the previous night. He declared Chen Ling a ghost come to claim their lives. Chun Tan dismissed the notion of ghosts but trembled with fear. Summoning courage, he picked up a dinner knife from the floor and lunged at Chen Ling's face, confident he could kill him again. Yet, as the knife neared Chen Ling, it froze mid-air, held by an invisible force despite Chun Tan's efforts to push it forward. A strange laugh came from behind Chen Ling. Suddenly, the knife vanished from Chun Tan's hand, replaced by a long, thin red paper strip. Chen Ling, eyes unfocused, chewed and swallowed the axe and kitchen knife he had been holding, then stared at Chun Tan, taking slow, mechanical steps forward while repeating hoarsely, "Dad, I'm hungry." The word sent chills down Chun Tan's spine, who feared Chen Ling would next grab his head and crush it like the weapons. Chun Tan shouted for Li Xiuquan to run and find the enforcers, then bolted toward the door. Li Xiuquan, crouching and trembling, snapped out of her daze and scrambled to the door, but her hand passed through where the handle should have been. She looked down to find the entire door transformed into a flat, two-dimensional image on red paper, impossible to open. Countless voices overlapped from all directions, filling the room with invisible figures whose crimson eyes mocked them. Red paper strips fluttered around Li Xiuquan, revealing grotesque faces before she screamed, stumbled backward, and collapsed unconscious. unconscious. Chun Tan felt the ground give way beneath him and fell heavily. He turned to see the entire floor undulating like crimson waves as Chun Ling approached. Realizing the truth of the enforcer's warnings, Chun Tan screamed that Chun Ling was a calamity who had stolen A. Ling's body. Chun Ling paused, smiled faintly, and pressed a finger to his lips in a shushing gesture as the red paper threatened to engulf Chun Tan. Two loud shattering sounds came from the side. Two figures in black and red uniforms burst through the window. One enforcer scanned the room and reported a level 4 calamity sighting at 128 Frost Street, requesting immediate judge support. Another enforcer bitterly questioned how they could hold off a level 4 calamity. The invisible audience murmured with interest at the arrival of new players. Chun Ling flicked his finger, causing Chun Tan, who had collapsed, to fall unconscious with blood trickling from his 7 orifices, staining the ground. One enforcer retreated, drawing a gun and firing several shots, but the brass bullets transformed into tiny red paper strips and disintegrated mid-air. Chun Ling raised his hand, releasing countless paper strips from the wide sleeves of his opera robe, which coiled around the two enforcers like snakes. Strips twisted violently, slamming the enforcers to the ground. Chun Ling's body expanded, the opera robe straining as faces pressed against his skin. Chaotic whispers filled the space as he transformed into a monster covered in writhing red paper tentacles, countless crimson eyes opening on the strips. No trace of Chun Ling remained. The monster smashed through the paper door and charged into the deserted street, light rain falling silently on its body. It chose a direction at random and shot forward like a crimson blur. A figure in black cut through the dark clouds, closely pursuing the monster. Han Meng calmly identified the target as a calamity. A worried voice on the walkie-talkie asked if it was an apocalypse level, but Han Meng assessed it as at most level 5, noting the compass had misjudged its energy. Level. The voice warned that level 5 was extremely dangerous. Han Meng did not respond and followed the crimson blur to the edge of District 3's wilderness, then suddenly plummeted like a cannonball. The black meteor crashed into the wilderness with an invisible shockwave, scattering sand and debris and forcing the crimson figure to halt. Its countless red paper tentacles swayed as all its eyes turned toward the dust-filled area. Han Meng stepped out, lighting a thick cigarette. The hem of his black trench coat, adorned with 4 silver stripes, glowed faintly. A breeze, like domain, silently spread, enveloping the red paper monster. Han Meng introduced himself as Chief Judge of District 3. Aurora Domain. Holding the cigarette in one hand and drawing a black handgun with the other, he thumbed off the safety. The sand and stones within the domain trembled as an invisible killing intent locked onto the monster. Han Meng spoke solemnly, invoking human civilization's justice to sentence the monster to death. He pulled the trigger, but the gun clicked with no bullet fired. Instead, the ground in front of him disintegrated instantly, soil and gravel vanishing as if shattered at the molecular level. A circular wound with a radius of 1 meter completely pierced the monster's body. Through this massive hole, Han Meng could see the streets of District 3 in the distance. The single shot had obliterated 2/3 of the monster's body. Just as Han Meng was about to holster his gun, the red paper monster, despite the gaping hole, did not die. With countless paper strips twisting and hanging in the wilderness sky, Han Meng's pupils contracted slightly. He immediately raised his gun and fired 3 more shots at the red sun above, the deconstructive force tearing 3 large holes in it. Fine rain drifted down through the holes, landing on Han Meng's solemn face and chilling him to the bone. Countless paper strips surged down like crimson rain, instantly turning the wilderness into a honeycomb. Han Meng fired wildly, barely managing to tear a gap in the red rain to save himself. His back was drenched in sweat as he realized he was no match for this calamity. Monster's aura surged again, jumping from the initial level 5 to the peak of level 5, just a hair's breadth away from the terrifying level 6. A light laugh echoed in his ears before he was slammed to the ground, his head hitting the earth with a heavy thud. The ground cracked at the impact point, and Han Meng spat out a mouthful of blood, lying motionless like a lump of mud. The battle had ended. The red paper returned to the monster's body, and the light rain sprinkled over the scarred earth. Just as the red paper monster was about to leave, the opera-robed arm that had emerged from it suddenly grabbed the monster's body, tearing at it fiercely as if something was trying to break free. 5 minutes earlier, Chun Ling read the last line of text and felt his heart sink. He looked up at the front of the stage, noticing countless crimson eyes still watching him from the darkness, but a section of chairs in the corner of the audience seats was now empty. Some audience members had disappeared. The shadowy figures in the audience seats stomped their feet on the theater floor, creating a rhythmic, thunderous sound that filled the confined space. The crimson eyes locked onto Chun Ling, filled with anger and accusation. The synchronized stomping caused the stage to shake and the spotlight above to tremble, as if it would not hold much longer. Chun Ling realized that because he had been killed by an axe in reality, the performance on stage had come to an abrupt halt. The interruption infuriated the audience, but unable to communicate directly with Chun-Ling, they expressed their dissatisfaction and threats through the stomping. Chun-Ling stared at his hands in disbelief, questioning if he was not actually dead. He wondered who was controlling his body now if his consciousness was here. Turning around, he saw a large black curtain covering the back half of the stage. Pulling it aside slightly, a series of images flooded his mind. He saw himself turning the dinner knife into paper, scaring Li Shochuan and Chan Tan into unconsciousness, and fighting the two enforcers. The sensation was surreal, as if watching his own actions from a third-person perspective, but the protagonist was no longer him. It was the audience that had taken over his body. Chun-Ling's peripheral vision caught the flickering text on the screen. Another group of figures in the audience seats disappeared. He muttered that the lower the expectation value, the more audience members intervened in the performance. Raising his hands, he saw his body becoming increasingly transparent and realized that his existence was being erased if the audience completely took over as the protagonist. He would be useless standing in front of the curtain. Chun-Ling took a deep breath and tentatively reached his hand toward the flickering images behind, hoping either to reclaim his body and become the protagonist again or die. His fingertips passed through the curtain, touching a barrier that slowed him down. The barrier was soft yet incredibly resilient, like a membrane. After a few attempts, Chun-Ling managed to push a single finger through and felt a glimmer of hope. Using all his strength, he forced his hand through the barrier, then his forearm and elbow. Text on the screen flickered again. The expectation value dropped to 14%, and another group of audience members disappeared. Chun-Ling felt the barrier becoming increasingly solid and noticed his body becoming more transparent. He realized it was not the barrier growing stronger, but his body growing weaker. Clenching his teeth, he could only slowly push his arm through the curtain, his progress now several times slower than before. Anxiety gnawed at him at this rate. He estimated that if the expectation value dropped to around 10%, he would no longer be able to pass through. Finally, after relentless effort, one of his arms fully passed through the curtain. He saw Han Meng struggling under the red rain in the images. After a moment of hesitation, Chun-Ling reached out and pressed his hand against Han Meng's forehead, using the red paper monster's strength to knock him unconscious so no one would witness his return to reality. Through Chun-Ling took a deep breath and plunged into the opening. A figure clad in an opera robe squeezed out from the red paper monster, hanging upside down in mid-air. Sensing Chun-Ling's imminent return, the red paper monster thrashed wildly. Its body began to grow transparent like paper soaked by rain, becoming thinner and thinner. His upper body, enduring the dizziness as he wrestled against it. Just then, a drenched young boy ran across the scarred earth. Heading straight for them, the boy shouted, "Brother," and grabbed Chun-Ling's arm, yanking him downward with force. With the added strength, Chun-Ling's lower body broke free from the paper, and he tumbled through the gap between the theater and reality, crashing heavily to the ground. The moment Chun-Ling broke free, the paper monster in the air melted away completely, as if it had never existed. Chun-Ling, still clad in the crimson opera robe, lay on his back in the muddy earth, breathing heavily. Rain clouds loomed overhead, and droplets slid down his hair. As the world spun around him, a familiar face appeared before him, shaking his body anxiously. Chen Yen, his younger brother, called out repeatedly, asking if Chun-Ling was okay. Chen Yen explained that after waking from surgery, he had waited at the hospital for Chun-Ling, but upon hearing about an apocalypse-level calamity invasion, he sneaked out to find him. Despite lockdowns in districts 2 and 3, Chen Yen had slipped through the less guarded areas between the districts. Chun-Ling shook his head and managed to sit up. Looking at Chen Yan's worried face, he recalled how Li Shochuan and Chan Tan had plotted to kill him to give his heart to Chen Yen, making Chen Yen indirectly the cause of his death. Yet Chen Yen, unaware of this, was just a trusting 15-year-old boy who had obediently undergone surgery. Chun-Ling instinctively denied killing him but froze before explaining further, unsure how to reveal the truth about the possession and the audience in his mind. Chen Yen showed no fear and calmly approached Han Meng, hoisting the heavier man onto his back and staggering deeper into the wilderness. Chun-Ling was stunned and asked what Chen Yen was doing despite the difficulty. Chen Yen insisted on helping bury Han Meng, warning that killing a judge was a serious crime and that they would come after Chun-Ling. Regardless, Chun-Ling tried to clarify that Han Meng was not dead yet. At that moment, Han Meng's eyelids fluttered and he groaned faintly, causing Chen Yen to lose balance and fall, dragging Han Meng down with him. As Han Meng's eyes slowly opened, a red figure rushed to his side, raised a fist, and slammed it into the back of his head, knocking him unconscious again. Chun-Ling shook his sore hand and exhaled, relieved that Han Meng had not fully woken up. He recalled seeing Han Meng's battle with the red paper monster through the theater curtain and knew he stood no chance against him. Lone Chun-Ling then urged Chen Yen to leave as the rain grew heavier. Han Meng was not the only judge in District 3. Others would arrive soon, making escape impossible. Minutes later, a group of figures in black and and red uniforms hurried to the scene. They noted that the aura of judgment and the calamity had disappeared, concluding that Brother Meng must have succeeded. The judges of District 3, clad in black trench coats, surveyed the devastated battlefield with shock, remarking on the intensity of the battle and the unusual nature of the calamity. Their attention shifted to the blood-soaked figure lying motionless on the ground. One judge rushed forward to pick up Han Meng and checked his breathing nervously, while the others exchanged glances with flickers of strange light in their eyes. Ma Zhong, the second-ranked judge of District 3, asked if Han Meng was dead, receiving confirmation that he was still alive. A subtle disappointment crossed the faces of the others, who then questioned the absence of the calamity's body. They concluded that the calamity had escaped and began searching the area, but the pouring rain left no clues. The calamity that had fought Han Meng moments before seemed to have vanished into thin air. Suddenly, urgent calls for Brother Ma echoed through the rain. An enforcer in a black and red uniform hurried over from a distance. Ma Zhong raised an eyebrow and asked about the urgency. The enforcer reported that District 2 had suffered a calamity attack the previous night, resulting in 36 deaths along half a street. Ma Zhong inquired if it was the same calamity, but the enforcer explained that the attacker was a level 3 calamity, likely different from the one they had encountered. Ma Zhong pondered the unusual occurrence of two calamities emerging from the same gray realm convergence point and asked if the District 2 calamity had been killed. Enforcer replied that it had fled into the mountains after the massacre and might have crossed into District 3. District 2 requested additional manpower due to overwhelming casualties. Ma Zhong acknowledged the situation and promised to handle it. Meanwhile, the judges swiftly carried the unconscious Han Meng to the hospital. Ma Zhong's gaze lingered on the battlefield ruins and the mountain outlines hidden in the night as he contemplated the emergence of two calamities from the same gray realm convergence point. As night deepened, two boys walked along a deserted path toward Frost Street. Chen Ling questioned the need to run, to which Chen Yen was momentarily speechless. Chen Ling reasoned that running was futile since the Aurora domain was limited to 1 city and 7 districts, with ordinary people barred from entering Aurora City and Districts 2 and 3 already locked down. Chen Yen suggested hiding in a mountain valley, but Chen Ling countered that hiding would not prevent them from being found and that continuous retreat was not a solution. Chen Ling also faced the pressure of maintaining audience expectation value, which was stuck at 20%, threatening to cause him to lose control and transform into a monster again. Chen Yen sensed something off in the logic, but accepted his brother's reasoning. Chen Ling then asked if Chen Yen was afraid of him after seeing his earlier transformation into a monster. Chen Yen lowered his head silently for a long moment before reassuring his brother that it was acceptable as long as he remained himself. Typically required a long recovery. Chen Yen responded that the doctor had been skilled and his recovery was swift. Chen Ling recalled that supernatural powers might exist in this world, allowing for advanced surgeries and rapid healing. He then asked about the protective charm Chen Yen usually wore around his neck. Chen Yen reached for his chest and found it missing, admitting he might have lost it while running. Chen Ling promised to make another charm upon their return, and Chen Yen agreed. Chen Yen then reminded Chen Ling to wash up, warning that walking down the street covered in blood would scare people. Chen Ling touched his neck and felt sticky blood. Remarkably, the wound from the red paper monster had healed quickly, with flesh mostly reconnected within half an hour, though it remained gruesome. Chen Ling admitted he did not know. He recalled that he had not been wearing the robe when killed by the axe, but had been dressed in it by Chun Tan and Li Shouchuan after his murder. He wondered why the robe had returned to him this time without them dressing him in it. Unable to resolve the mystery, Chen Ling stopped thinking about it. Since transmigrating to this world, strange occurrences had become increasingly frequent. Though he had considered burning the unlucky robe, Chen Ling sighed at Chen Yan's pitiful gaze and silently continued washing both himself and the robe.